Look at the men in this photograph. It's the onset of the Great Depression, and widespread unemployment has left them wearing signs on the street just begging for a single week of labor. This diagram shows the mechanical trap of a severe recession. When employment drops, it triggers an immediate plunge in household income. With less income, people stop buying things. This halt in consumption forces businesses to cut jobs again, draining even more money. At the time, the dominant economic theory was classical liberalism. Classical liberalism is the belief that free markets will naturally self-correct imbalances without government interference. Experts trusted that the invisible hand of supply and demand would eventually step in to fix the massive job losses on its own. But waiting for a market to self-correct takes time. While theorists debated long-term equilibrium, real people were starving in the streets right then and there. That immediate suffering is what drove British economist John Maynard Keynes to propose a radical alternative. He argued that the free market is flawed, and during a severe crash, it cannot be trusted to heal itself. Instead, Keynes believed the only way to restore balance was through direct intervention by the state. Keynes didn't want the government to permanently run the economy. He viewed the state as an emergency circuit breaker, stepping in with sheer financial force to violently snap the downward spiral and restart the engine. To execute this rescue, a government pulls two main levers. The first is monetary policy. Monetary policy involves a central bank managing the total supply of money and interest rates. As you can see here, the state physically prints more fiat money to flood the paralyzed system with fresh cash. Fiat money is currency that holds value simply because a government maintains it, rather than being backed by a physical commodity like gold. Along with printing cash, the state slashes interest rates. This makes borrowing money incredibly cheap, encouraging both businesses and citizens to take out massive loans and start spending again. The second lever is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy refers to a government using its taxation and spending powers to influence the economy. To create mass employment, the state artificially generates jobs by funding massive public works, like the large-scale excavation and construction projects shown here. By injecting fresh cash and artificially generating labor, the government quickly forces life back into a deeply frozen market. But building enormous infrastructure projects and printing cash requires vast resources. How does a financially paralyzed government actually pay for all of this? The entire intervention is financed through public debt. The state borrows heavily to pay for the recovery. This pipeline graphic maps out how the theory is supposed to work. The reservoir of borrowed state debt flows directly into household income as citizens get artificial jobs. With money in their pockets, they buy goods, which pushes that flow straight into business revenue. With businesses thriving again, the state collects higher tax revenues, which are then used to wipe out the original debt that started the whole process. The entire system relies on taking out a massive loan against the future. The state bets that the resulting economic boom will generate enough cash to pay back the borrowed money. While this theoretical rescue looks brilliant on paper, manipulating the timeline of money carries severe long-term costs. By increasing the total supply of money, each individual dollar loses some of its value. This rapid expansion of currency directly causes inflation, making everyday goods more expensive for everyone. Simultaneously, those artificially low interest rates convince households to take on bad debt. People begin spending money they haven't actually earned yet, over-leveraging their personal finances. By flooding the market with cheap money to escape a crisis today, the state plants the seeds for another recession tomorrow. And the theory of public debt has a fatal flaw. If the artificial boom isn't large enough to cover the initial borrowing, the state's debt doesn't vanish, it grows. To avoid defaulting on those massive loans, the government eventually has only one real option. It must drastically raise taxes on future citizens. Higher taxes eat directly into household income. With less take-home pay, families are forced to cut back on their daily consumer spending. This animated flow circuit shows the exact same trap from the 1929 crash returning. The tax-induced drop in spending forces businesses to cut jobs all over again. The initial intervention didn't actually cure the underlying economic disease. It nearly suppressed the symptoms and handed the financial bill to the next generation. Keynesianism remains one of the most effective ways to drag an economy out of a sudden death spiral, even if its long-term mechanics are heavily flawed. Keynes himself was fully aware of these future consequences, but he chose to prioritize immediate survival over distant financial stability. Economics often forces a brutal negotiation with time. When critics warned him about the eventual damage his policies would cause in the future, Keynes offered a blunt, unapologetic response: "In the long run, we are all dead."